And we're going to talk about chapter extension 2, which really gets into various different technologies of collaborative information systems that will be the most useful for you for your student projects, both now for this class and into the future. In particular, the questions we're going to answer. Number one, what are the IS requirements for student project collaboration in general? Two, how can you use collaboration tools for team communication? Number three, how can you use collaboration tools to share content? Number four, how can you use collaboration tools for project planning and management? And lastly, which collaboration IS is right for you and your team? So let's get started. What are the IS requirements for student project collaboration? Well, there's three big things you're definitely going to need to be able to do. One is communication. Two is to share content with each other. And number three is do some sort of project planning and management. Now, those are absolutes that you must be able to do. Nice to have features might be something like a discussion forum, survey, wiki, blog, photo sharing, video sharing, and so on, depending on how exactly you want to wrap this up. So what things will be most useful for you as far as tool sets go? Number one, you're probably looking for free or very cheap tools. I know as students, most of you don't have much of an income to put towards investing in these tools. I mean, that's understandable. Number two, you want it to be easy to learn and use. Number three, you want it to have integrated features. And the more integrated it is, the easier it will be for you guys to move forward. The less integrated, the more disjointed the communication, content sharing, and project planning is going to be. And that can lead to all kinds of miscommunication and troubles with your feedback and iterative process. It's great if you can provide some evidence of versioning. In other words, suppose somebody makes a copy or creates the first version or first rough draft. How do you know that's the rough draft? I mean, you can label it as rough draft, and that's one way of providing it. But there's also ways within the tools themselves that can keep track of which version you're looking at. And lastly, it's important that you actually start using tools now that you will see later in business. Now, some of the tools we'll talk about today, you won't, even in business world, they're pretty rare. Sometimes they're a little bit slightly more useful. What I want you guys to start thinking about, though, is as you leave, I mean, yes, you can use a simple set of tools to get through this project, and you can suffice, right? But will that really prepare you for the business world? Will that give you the leg up over your, compatriots who are all graduating with a similar knowledge set as far as classes they take? But did you have more experience with tools that'll help you on the job later? So I also want to give good tips along that. All right, how can you use collaboration tools for team communication? So there's actually two different types of communication. One's called synchronous and the other's asynchronous. Synchronous is when you're basically all together and communicating at the same time in sync, right? So if somebody says something, someone immediately answers, or if there's a question, there's an immediate answer. Asynchronous basically means somebody may ask a question and you don't know exactly when you're going to get an answer. So they may say something right now, and then it might be 6 minutes, it might be 6 hours, it might be 6 days later before you get an answer or a response. All right, so synchronous, there are various different ways you can have synchronous communication, including being physically present or through various different virtual meetings. Synchronous can also be done through shared calendars or invitations and attendance. And the asynchronous include things like email, discussion forums, team surveys, and whatnot. So deciding how you're going to communicate with each other. And sometimes you're going to do a mix of these. Excuse me. You'll do a mix of synchronous and asynchronous. Now, since all of you are online students, generally speaking, you probably won't be doing the single location, all sitting around discussing this, unless you just happen to find a group of members who all live in the same location and you specifically decide to do so. But most of you are going to be doing virtual meetings through synchronous or asynchronous mechanisms. So let's move. But we'll talk a little bit more about what can work here in a minute. All right. So a big way to do asynchronous meetings would be some sort of facilitated technology. Now, usually you want to start with some sort of agenda. You have certain outcomes you want to get out of the meeting. Sometimes you even get as specific as defining the rules of the discussion. There's different roles that are played, whether they're a scribe or secretary, a facilitator or leader, and then there's the participants who are giving feedback. And you want to have public displays served as group or organizational memory. So you want to somehow capture what's going on and make it visible for everybody so they know. Now this might be you record the meeting, or you just at least capture all the minutes in detail and share that with everyone. But there's got to be some way to capture what happened during the meeting. Now there's a lot of different technologies that allow this to happen. So here's something out of the University of Arizona where they have computers basically for all the desks in the classroom. Now, we do something similar at ECU. We have our new smart classrooms and we require students to come in with laptops. We also have various different labs where you can work together. The technology here is very, very interesting in that it's growing. And actually looking at the keyboard and mouse, it looks like the technology being used in this classroom is actually several years old, probably over 10 years old. Today we have even more sophisticated ways of doing it with various different video and web conferencing tools. So here's just a few. I'm not going to play these YouTube videos for you. You can click on these links yourself and go to them. But some of the big ones include like WebEx Meeting, Adobe Connect, Cisco. Well, Cisco actually is the one who created WebEx, but they also have even more sophisticated program called technology called telepresence. Microsoft has their Link and Skype, and so there's a whole host of different video and web conferencing tools that are available out there. And I encourage you to go take a look at some of these videos to get an idea of what they're like, what capabilities do they have. Now, one thing you may be familiar with, at least at ECU, is the Saba meeting, which is itself a web conferencing tool. In fact, we're going to use Saba meeting later in the semester because I want you to have at least a little experience with this. Right? We're going to do an interactive lab using Saba meeting. And it has a lot of the same functionality as like WebEx and Adobe Connect. At the high end, you have these programs, and I mentioned Cisco Telepresence. This is a basic look at what Cisco Telepresence can do. Now, this is an extremely expensive setup, as you might imagine, with these large screen TVs, with high definition videos of the people sitting around tables, all connecting up. And there's even the ability to, as you see down below the people's faces, there's this projector showing what's showing on someone's laptop, so you can share the screen. And all this is integrated together. The voices come out, that makes it look like you're sitting in the conference room with them. Now that is a pretty powerful technology, an extremely expensive technology, and a lot of small businesses and even medium-sized businesses simply can't afford this. The large businesses can, and it can be very useful when you have people in multiple different cities and they need to and you want to have that full, rich experience. So instead of just sitting in front of a computer and having a small image, this makes it seem like everybody is there and participating, which can be a very powerful experience. Now you might be asking, why would they spend $300,000? And this is just for one room. So if you do this in multiple locations, it can quickly increase the costs to millions of dollars. Well, think about this. Prior to this type of technology, if you wanted to have this type of meeting, you'd have to fly people across the US to do this. So think about all the airline mileage that is being saved by this type of technology. And generally speaking, that's the main reason why you do this. It allows you to have these types of meetings without flying important people halfway across the country, and it saves the people time that when they're on the flight, they may not be nearly as productive as if they stayed in their office and continued working. So this is absolutely phenomenal technology that allows you so that you spend this kind of money because it can do some great things that you may not want to waste time flying people around the world to do. But there's also a lot of cheaper versions that do a scaled down version of this, and that's what the video and web conferencing, a lot of them are what they're specializing in now. It also does a fair amount of collaboration. So we want to have good collaboration, workflow, and content management, right? So how can we use collaboration tools to share content? So that we can have no control, where users have to keep track of who made what changes when and where. It is not a very good way of collaborating. It's rife with problems. Now recently I've had a fair amount of experience doing collaboration with no control in it, and I really did not like it, but I managed to get by. Now, the first stage up is to have some sort of version management where the system indicates who made what changes. Now this is nice if you're working with Microsoft Word. You can have it track changes, and then you know who put what comments where, who changed what words where. And yes, I've used that as well, and that is far more powerful in that you can know who changed what. It also gives you the ability to start sharing documents much easier. Then you can get even more sophisticated where you actually do version control. So a system moves the document to each participant automatically. Now what's nice about this is that it not only keeps track of who made what changes, but then updates everyone automatically. Sometimes it'll allow like a checkout system so that if you want to work on a document, you have to check it out. So there's not two people working on the document at the same time. That's even more powerful, right? Now, to give you a quick example here before I move on. Now, in my own work, I experienced this change of versioning control and collaboration. At our school, we have to, when I finish the syllabus for my class, I have to submit that syllabus to my department head. Now, it used to be that we would have to do this through email attachments. That has recently changed, and now we're required to submit that through SharePoint. Well, why do we do that? Well, one is to help us with version control and to help with a control over who has submitted what when, and to make sure nothing falls through the cracks, because we can keep a very automated list of the syllabuses that have been submitted and approved. And so with version content becomes permission to edit and change things. Now in your group, you're probably going to have to allow everyone to read, edit, and delete everything that's being created. But there is something, and it's called the CRUD model, or the CRUD permissions. CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete. So there's 4 different things that you can do. Now generally speaking, in small groups, everyone's going to have permission to do each of these. But as you become more and more advanced in your organization, you're going to want to give different team members different abilities. Some team members may be able to read, but not create or update or delete. Other ones might be able to read and edit, but can't delete. Others might be able to do everything, and some may have no permission to do anything, even view. and it depends a lot on the security and how you want to protect things. We also have, with more advanced versions of version control, a document checkout and a workflow control. So who gets to see the documents and make and basically agree that the document has met specifications. All right, so how can we use collaboration tools for project planning and management? So the last major piece of the puzzle. Well, there's kind of a continuum here from simple to-do lists to advanced project management, where you have perhaps even hundreds of people working together on a project and you need to coordinate all their effort. Now, project management is all about who can do what, when, and where, and with what resources. And so it can easily get very complex. In small groups, this is easy to track, and you have many tools that can help with that. In your own little personal groups, you could use a Word document where you specify who's doing what when. And it can work. Now, what's slightly better might be using a program like Excel, because it does allow you to fill out the document faster and a little bit more consistently. Stepping it up one more notch, you can use Office web apps or Google Drive, Google Calendar, Outlook to start managing this process a little better. And then you can go up even another level and go with some basic project management specific tools like SharePoint or Basecamp. And there's a whole lot of others. In fact, I worked at a company once that did this. It's called Virtual Communication Services, and their tool, the VPMI, and it is available, and you can use it for, I forget their base price, is like $5 a month or so per user. And a lot of these project management tools, and they might have some free versions, but a lot of them are pretty cheap, but allow you to manage a project using the basic project management toolkit. Going up a notch from there, as an application called Microsoft Project, which allows you to plan and organize much bigger projects. And I've seen people do, multi-year projects they've designed within Microsoft Project. What Microsoft Project does do some things really good. One thing it doesn't do real good is helping with the overall governance of projects at a more of a managerial or executive level. But it does a really good job of helping you to track projects that are ongoing. And then even the most comprehensive might be Microsoft Project Server. And this is something that you'd use in large organizations. Microsoft Project is an industry-wide standard tool for managing projects. It's not a bad tool to learn how to use. But, if you want to try to just get by, you can use Word and Excel. If you want to start learning tools that'll be useful for you later in life, I would recommend you work with some sort of free project management tool or even Microsoft Project if you have access to it. And it doesn't have to be an overly complex project that you create, but just work with it, learn it enough, learn enough of the tool set that it can be useful for you and your colleagues and you and your group mates, I should say. All right, so here it comes. Question 5. Which collaboration IS is right for your team? All right, you ready? Because I got the answer. And the answer is it depends. I know, pretty cheesy answer. Well, the fact of the matter is I can't specify exactly what's going to work best for you and your team. Only your team can specify what's going to work best for you. And that's what I really want to reiterate here. Your team is going to have to find the set of tools that's going to work best for it, for you guys. Okay? But here are some options. Probably some stuff that I would consider if I were in your shoes. So starting with communication tools, where would I start? Well, I might start with, one, I want to make sure it's pretty easy to learn, has some useful features, and it's free or very low cost. So some obvious options might be Skype. Okay? Or you could use, a communication tool. I kind of skipped over email here. Email is another useful communication tool. These 3 communication tools are all designed for synchronous communication, and that's kind of why I want to bring these up. So the asynchronous, yeah, email will work, discussion forums will work, um, but for synchronous, Skype, Google Hangout, and Saba Meeting are three possible choices. You have Saba Meeting generally in the business world isn't free, but it is for U.S. students, so feel free to use it. It's a little more difficult to learn than Google Hangout or Skype. However, it does have some good practical experience you can apply in the business world when you start using more sophisticated web conferencing tools. Now, Skype and Google Hangout are a bit more limited. They both have share screen capabilities, which is actually fairly useful, um, especially when you're working on a document and you can say, hey, look, this is what I found. And then you can say, look, everyone, and share your screen, and you can show everyone exactly what you have done. What's a little bit more powerful about Google Hangout is that you can integrate with Google Drive and with YouTube. So if you want to show a video for everyone, you can do that. It's very easy to do. Saba Meeting also has similar capabilities where you can share screen. But it also has the capabilities of managed participation, upload agendas, and it has a whiteboard. And the whiteboard is actually really cool because then you can sketch notes to each other, perhaps even write meeting minutes on it. All three have a chat built in, so a text chat. So as you're working, you can chat to each other as well as talking. But you need to decide which one of these will work for you if you're doing virtual meetings. Let's look at content sharing tools. Now, there's a lot of different options out here. I'm looking at 4, and please feel free to go beyond this if you have other things that work well, by all means. You can use Dropbox. That's a tool that I use actually quite a bit with my collaboration. You can use Microsoft OneDrive, which might actually be pretty good considering some of the options it has with integrating with Microsoft Office. And since we're doing a lot of work with Office in this class, you might find that integration useful. There's Google Drive. And this might be useful simply if you decide to use something like Google Hangout. Google Drive integrates with it, which can be very useful for you. Now, you don't have to use Google Docs with Google Drive. You can upload any document to Google Drive, including, Excel documents and Access documents. But as you move forward, you may decide that you want to use Google Drive because you like Google Docs, or you already use Google Docs in other classes. That's fine. Microsoft OneDrive and Google Drive both require you to have accounts with Microsoft and Google, respectively, which some people like, some people don't like. Be that as it may, usually you need some sort of sign-in, which Dropbox requires a sign-in too. Email requires a sign-in, so that's usually not a major deal breaker. Now, perhaps the easiest thing to use is email, simply because all of you have lots of experience with it over time. Lots and lots of experience with email. And so it's very easy to use for content sharing. The problem is it isn't nearly as useful. And so it's very easy to lose track of versions or do very poor version management. If somebody makes a change, if one person makes a change, it may not be known to everybody else that they've made that change. Whereas if you use something like Dropbox, Microsoft OneDrive, or Google Drive, there is an auto sync function. So you can download the document to your local computer, make the changes, and when you save it, it automatically updates everybody else's version of the document that they have on their own desktop. So think about what just happened there. You edit it on your desktop, you save it, and it automatically updates the version that the other people in your group have on their desktop. And that's one thing I really like about Dropbox, OneDrive, and Google Drive is that capability. You also have the ability to share things too. So if you make a change and you want to share it, you can share it even outside of your group with people like me. So maybe you're working on a document in Dropbox, OneBox, Drive. There's a share button and you can share it with people. So, and I've had experience with all 4 of these. I would say probably the ones I've used the most have been Dropbox and email, in part because I have trouble getting other people to learn Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive. I've tried to encourage them to do that. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not, but it has to be a tool that all the people that are working together agree to use and agree to learn how to use, not just use it because they go along with it. You have to commit yourself to actually learning how it works. And if you do that, it can be very, very effective. So which collaboration is right for your team? Well, there is no one right tool per se, but many options that work to varying degrees based on the functionality of the tools and the willingness of the collaborators to learn those tools. So you can go with a kind of minimal set, which is like email, you know, or a file server. You can do your task management in Word and Excel. Yeah, it's free. It's easy to use. It has very little practical value to you as you move on. Um, but it can lead to problems in your collaboration. A little bit better option might be to use communication tools like Skype or Google Hangout. Use the content sharing tools like Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive. Do a little bit more high-end task management like Google Calendar or a shared Outlook calendar. Nice to have features. You can include some nice features like discussion boards or surveys, wikis, um, to add into that. All right, all of these are still free, so you're not spending any money. Still pretty easy to learn. It might take you a little bit of time if you haven't used any of these before. But it has a little bit more value to you as you go out into the business world because some of this stuff actually is used out in the business world. Now, the most comprehensive options um, might be communication tools like Microsoft Lync or Adobe Connect, and then those actually cost a lot of money. So I'm not necessarily recommending you go out and purchase these really expensive web conferencing tools. If you have access to them, that's great. Maybe some of you at work have access to some of these more comprehensive tools and know that there's a free version, a client version available to the other members of your group. And if you want to do that, that's awesome. Okay, um, but you know it's a great experience. It can greatly help you as you move forward into the business world. More sophisticated content sharing is a little bit harder to get a hold of free versions and keep your prices down. But if you do use something like SharePoint, it does have a lot more integrated capabilities built in, like integrated with email or versioning control that allows you to keep better track of stuff. There is a higher cost usually. There's a much higher learning curve required, but oftentimes it's worth it. So how do you choose the set for your team? Well, for simple tasks, and you might even decide it in this projects. You have 4 projects, and with maybe you want something slightly more than the minimal set. Maybe you want to go up to the good set, or maybe you have access to the comprehensive tools, and people are like, yeah, I really want to learn how to use this stuff. It'll take some time, but it'll be worth it long term. Specifically later in the semester when you're working together to develop really great products. So today we talked about what are the IS requirements for student project collaboration. Particularly we looked at technologies for team communication, for sharing content, and for project planning and management. And what will work best for you? Well, that's up to you guys to decide. And hopefully you'll be motivated to push yourselves a little bit, to learn a little bit more collaboration tools, but also think through how exactly are we going to share documents, how are we going to keep track of who's doing what work, and um, and making sure that that is reflected in the project tools that you have to come up with quality products at the end. All right, well, that's all I have for today. Thank you guys all for joining me, and I'll be back next time with talking about Chapter 2.